This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Hi, hello, Peter Burns sitting in for Mr. Paul Finebaum. 855-242-PAUL is the number, and the phone lines are already locked and loaded, coming off the heels of an incredible weekend. Spring games, could you taste the football? Or you struggle a little bit on Monday. It happens. Case of the Mondays here for Paul, because you're hanging out with me. You can hit me up on Twitter at Peter Burns ESPN. Let's get into the headlines, and we start down in Athens. Yes, Georgia, Kirby Smart, making G-Day great again, feeling a little bit more like a spring scrimmage. Oh, my goodness, here we go. Justin Fields, a new starter in Athens? Relax, people, but we will discuss that. Matt in Gainesville is already in here, wants to talk about it. Nick Saban, where things stand in Alabama quarterback battle after spring game. Me, Hayes, and Kubiak were talking about that before the show. My goodness, half of the league, half of the SEC is worried about their quarterbacks coming in, and Jalen Hurts could have had an opportunity to kind of pull away from the pack. He struggled a little bit as far as what the Tide did. Here's what Nick Saban had to say after a day.
I was not disappointed in the way Jalen played. I think, we've got some guys that can rush a little bit, and I think that even though we were rushing four guys most of the time, there was way too much pressure in the pocket for the quarterback to be able to operate like we'd like. I think Jalen made some good plays in the game and made some good throws. Obviously, I'm sure if you talk to him, he'd say there's things that I wish I could have done better and would improve on, and that's what we'll go to work on.
Staying in the West, Justin McMillan. What? Yes, Justin McMillan, not Lowell Narcisse or Miles Brennan, has the best spring game. LSU quarterback competition far from over. And speaking about quarterback competitions, out in Rocky Top, Jared Garantano makes a big statement in the Tennessee spring game. Craig McElroy is going to talk to us a little bit about that coming up. Keller Chris going out there, it could be an option. Jeremy Pruitt, though, had something to say about the Vols fans and some of his players in the spring game. Coach Pruitt, we talking about quitting?
To me, it's kind of like our football team for the fans. The ones that were here, I'm proud they were here. They're fired up. They're ready to get going. Okay, and then there were some people that wasn't here that had legitimate reasons they couldn't be here. All right, and then there were some people that wasn't here that, why wasn't they here? It's kind of like our football team. So I think we all need to look in the mirror and see who we want to be.
I love it. And we're not looking into the mirror. We're looking into the mirror. You can tell me that Jeremy Pruitt is going to fit in just well here in the SEC. A little bit of Nick Saban in him in that post-game press conference. We'll talk about that. We got a lot to get into as well. Phone lines are already locked and loaded, but let's go ahead and show you the guests of honor today. Matt Moscona, ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, 104.5 ESPN, down in the 225, going to join me in about 15 minutes. And big Booger McFarland, I guess he's skinny Booger McFarland now, is going to join us in the hour number 2. Greg McElroy, college football analyst. I just love when we talk about it. Everybody's favorite ginger is going to join us at the top of the 5 o'clock Eastern hour, and he was on the call out there in Knoxville. Then Barrett Sallee, CBS Sports. That's what we're going to do in the 6 p.m. hour, so get ready for that. The 6 p.m. hour is going to be called Amnesty Hour because I've got a couple of tweets, shockingly enough, that I may have to back out from. So the 6 p.m. Eastern hour, our final hour here of the Paul Finebaum Show. If you've ever said anything on this show, if you said something on the weekend, if you tweeted it, if you had MySpace, Friendster, whatever it might have been, and you want to take it back, the last hour of the show is dedicated to you. Okay, you're allowed to take back. Like, I'm going to probably take back my 8-5 prediction from Alabama a couple years ago. And there's another Alabama quarterback tweet that I'm going to take back, but I'm not going to do it until the Amnesty Hour. But right until that point, let's go ahead and take some calls. 855-242-PAUL is the phone number. We go to Gainesville, not Florida, Georgia. Matt, what's happening?
How about you, Alabama? I mean, y'all can't even get more people at y'all's spring game than we can in Athens. I mean, what happened? Did y'all have a pig meet or something, or wrestling, or what happened? I mean, only 72,000. We had 82,000 plus, and half our stadium was under construction. I mean, come on. I mean, we're dominating everything: recruiting, spring practice. And Jeremy Pruitt, what a loser. Hey, if your fans don't show up, let's blame the fans, Jeremy. He's going to be the biggest catastrophe in Knoxville, Tennessee since Lane Kiffin. I'm so glad he's going there. We're going to beat the crap out of them next year. All I got to say is not. And I was thinking about this, Peter. Did you hear what Paul said? He couldn't find any national championship underwear at the hardware store the other day.
The thoughts of me thinking about. Were you talking about that? Paul said that, or Pruitt said that?
Paul said they said you can't find underwear. Who buys underwear at a hardware store? Matt,
more importantly, the question is who thinks about Paul Finebaum in his underwear? Not me. That's a problem. That's a you problem, Matt.
I know he said it, but I will say this: Justin Fields looked good. He looked really good. His ability to be able to tuck the ball and run. We're going to have. I think you'll see in our cupcake game of the year against Austin Peay. I think you'll see Kirby rotating them too, and Fromm didn't really do anything to impress. But I think we're going to have some controversy. I think Fromm's got the job, but I do think I want to hear all them Alabama fans. I mean, could they not get any more people? And I got a challenge. I respect Larry, I respect Jim, I respect Rich. I don't like that squirrel guy. I want a phone feud with him. So if he brings nothing to the show, I like to shoot squirrels and just tell him to let me know when he can. We can do a phone feud. I'll call in. All right, I got to go. See you, Peter. Good dogs.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the phone call. A lot to unpack here when Matt comes in with this. First thing, I like Jeremy Pruitt. I didn't know what to expect out of him. I know that you said that it's not going to be a very successful hire. I like Pruitt because I do see a little bit of Saban in him, and that's what he was doing. Calling out the fans, that was a little tongue-in-cheek. 65,000. No, it's not 80. It's not 90,000 fans over in Neyland. But he is having fun. And basically, the message to the fans was exactly what Nick Saban does when he rips into the media. It's not the media that Nick Saban ever rips into. It's his players through his comments to the media. That's what he does, and that's what Jeremy Pruitt's got a first-hand seat to see over the last couple of years is an opportunity to watch how Nick Saban addresses his team without addressing his team. Okay, so everything that Jeremy Pruitt said about the fans, that wasn't about the fans. He said it. 65,000, thanks for coming out. But there was guys that, quote, quit. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to root everybody that doesn't want to be a part of this team. That is talking about Juwan Jennings as well, too, who I think is going to be back on this team up for Tennessee next year. And I think that he can be a major role in helping them rebuild this squad. But he's going to be tough on Juwan Jennings. He's going to be tough on this team because none of those guys he recruited. He wants to find out who is there and going to play for Tennessee and be a part of that program. You want to play? Great. If not, you get the heck out. And that's why Jeremy Pruitt's having that fun with you. 855-242-PAUL. Let's go to Paul. Montgomery, Alabama. What's happening?
I'd like to say one thing. I enjoy the show when you're on it.
Thank you, Paul.
Outstanding job.
I appreciate that.
Now, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to refer to that idiot called Matt. Can you please tell him that before Alabama's 8A game, they showed Alabama whipping them again? They haven't had a national championship before that boy was born. That boy was born. And I'll be 70 years old in August. And I remember most of them. And I'll just tell you this. Until they win one, you keep your mouth shut. And he never was in the service. If you're in the service, you don't never let anybody know who you are because all the problems come with it. Until you win a championship, you have to show that you're deserving of one. And if I remember correctly, I call him Pineapple. Tua did an outstanding job in the fourth quarter. What he did, actually, the whole second half. Mm-hmm. But that's just part of it. I just wanted to say what I call it is that we had to stop our game, and the best part of the Alabama offense was when I couldn't find it on my cable. I got 15 ESPN channels and could not get a thing. At 4 o'clock Sunday morning, I watched the end of the game, and it was outstanding.
Paul, I will tell you this. I would much rather have I would much rather have a trophy celebration than about 8,000 more fans in the stadium. And listen, I know Georgia fans are filled the same exact way that are watching and listening here to the Paul Finebaum show. So, yes, Matt was bragging about having 80,000 fans and the stadium being under construction, and that's fantastic. Guess what? Alabama fans said, I don't care. We could have had 0 people show up at A-Day game, and guess what? We got a title, and titles fly forever. And that's just the way it is. If you want to go out that, hey, heavy is the head that wears the crown. You're going to have to be at it.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
A man who joined me earlier on the day. I just couldn't hear enough from you, Matt Moscona, as you were with me over my SiriusXM radio show on SEC this morning, hashtag branding. And what have we learned in the last 6 hours? Is Baton Rouge, have they figured out who in the heck's going to be the quarterback after this weekend?
After you and I hung up this morning, true story. So after you and I hung up this morning, I had to go meet a client at Coffee Call in Baton Rouge.
Oh, my favorite beignets. You get $8 and you get 7 pounds of food. I love it.
And it's even better at like 2 a.m. But so I'm meeting a client at Coffee Call. I walk in, I sit down, and there's 2 older gentlemen having coffee and beignets, and we overhear they're talking about the baseball team and how they're terrible and how LSU football doesn't have a quarterback. So I don't think much has changed between when you and I spoke this morning and now.
Who would have thought that the most exciting thing in Baton Rouge right now would be Will Wade's basketball team? And I'm being God honest truth, because when I was down there in the 225 a couple of days ago, there was a lot of people talking about it. Like I still think that LSU football could do some things, especially with the depth, and this defensive line was great. But people are saying right now, after getting swept by South Carolina baseball in the spring game, they are talking about Will Wade's basketball, which I think is fantastic. But let's go back into football for a second. What was the most impressive thing? What thing did you circle from LSU over the spring game on Saturday that said this is a good thing?
The defensive line. Okay. And, with a $2.5 million coordinator and a defensive line coach as your head coach, I think that shouldn't surprise people. But, Peter, they lost so many guys across the defensive front. Guys that you came to know like Christian Lockature and Greg Gilmore and Frank Herron, and guys that have been around the program 4 or 5 years. That was a lot of experience and depth to replace. But, man, they were borderline unblockable, and it didn't matter if you were talking about the ones or the twos. If you want maybe like a name to watch or a couple of names to watch, Caleb Von Chasson was a highly touted edge rusher. He's supposed to be the air quotes, the next one, the next Arden Key, Barkevius Mingo. He's kind of built in that mold. And Ogeron said after the spring game, and if they had been counting sacks, he probably would have had about 5 of them, which is true. And it didn't matter left or right side of the line because LSU has 2 left-handed quarterbacks. So there were times that Chasson lined up on the left end to rush blindside. And, man, it didn't matter who they put on him. They even gave tight end help in the fourth quarter of the game. It was Thad Moss, Randy's kid, blew right by him. He was salty, man. Like that's the guy you can tell he's next in the lineage of great pass rushers. But the whole defensive line was really good. Yeah,
you look at Chad Lavallee, you go back and look at Booger McFarland, Marcus Spears. LSU has had those defensive players, but really there wasn't that guy. Maybe really the last 2 years outside of Arden Key was really kind of a roller coaster ride. Okay. What in the world's going on at quarterback? Because we started looking at this saying, hey, it's a 2-horse race, Lowell Narcisse, Miles Brennan, and all of a sudden Justin McMillan, who's been there for it seems like 8 years but hasn't got a sniff, ended up impressing Ed Ogeron the most?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know him, Peter. He was a 2-time state champ in Texas. He's a lefty as well. He's just a smaller guy with not a big arm, but he functions really well within the offense. I would say the problem is twofold. Number one, Peter, literally first play of the game. And, Steve Ensminger could be the most brilliant play caller ever. He could really struggle. But, the very first play of the game, they set up a wide receiver screen to Jonathan Giles. That's the Texas Tech transfer.
Yeah.
And McMillan ran first offense with the first team. First play, he airmails the screen. It's it doesn't matter what you call if you can't complete that pass. So there's McMillan had his bright spots, but he also completed less than half of his passes. So if you're going to be an offense that tries to be balanced and uses the passing game as an extension of the running game, as you always hear, you've got to complete those passes, and it just wasn't good enough. Now, it doesn't have to be good enough today. It has to be good enough in September, so they've got time. But I really think Ed would, and the whole staff and fan bases and the extension of the whole program would have liked a little more clarity coming out of Saturday. The one thing that's clear is that just like talent alone, arm strength, ability to make plays, Miles Brennan is that guy. It's just he also threw a pick, and he threw a pick in every game he played in last year. And they just got to refine it, man. It's just, are they willing to go through those growing pains with a young quarterback?
All right, Matt, how do you refine that? I mean, Brennan, listen, there's no doubt. I looked in Ed Ogeron's eyes a couple of days ago when I was down in Baton Rouge, and he says, we're going to pass the ball. He said it in much more convincing Cajun accent. But what is just not, quote unquote, clicking? Because you and I both know in these spring games, these games are set up for the offense to look great, right? I mean, you can just go out there and Ed Ogeron can talk about his defense and say, guys, here's the deal. We're not going to run a blitz. This is going to be set up, and I want to have a great storyline coming out of the spring. What's that one thing that Miles is not doing that can go ahead and supplant him as a starter in fall?
Yeah. Okay, so two things. One, you're right about spring games typically, but to Ed's credit, he didn't set that up. He went ones on ones, twos on twos, and the defense was clearly far ahead of the offense. He could have manipulated it with his first offense against his second defense or against walk-ons to make it look good, but he did, to his credit. And what could Brennan do? I put it to you this way, Peter. It's what Kirby did 2 years ago with Eason. He knew he had a 5-star. It was his guy. He was the future of the program at the time, and they said, we're going to ride with him. And they went 7-5, and they took their lumps. But going into last year, people were really high on Eason going into year 2. Now, he got hurt, and Fromm obviously had the great year, and that the whole roster was really good. But I mean, I don't know. I've never played the position, obviously not collegiately or anything, but it would feel like the only way, as in anything in life, you're ever going to adapt to the speed of the game or get better at something is by doing it. So let's get play. I mean, I'm really surprised they didn't do more of that last year when they had the opportunity to get Miles Brennan more live action.
Yeah, it's going to be a situation that continues to develop. Like, honestly, half of the league, it's not just an LSU issue. They're having this issue down at Alabama. They're having it in a bunch of other places, Florida, and finding out what quarterback is going to play, Tennessee. And so for LSU, they're going to have to rely on what LSU did a lot out of Les Miles. It's, by the way, we're going to run the ball and we're going to play good defense, and we'll see if they can do that. He is Matt Moscona. Get ready for your show over there at 104.5 ESPN. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
You got it, Peter. Thanks, man.
There it is, Matt Moscona.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flip.
You can hit me up on Twitter at Peter Burns ESPN. You can hit up this man. It used to go by SEC Booger, but now he makes bajillions of dollars talking sports for a living, and now he's at ESPN Booger. How did you still keep your blue checkmark Booger when you got to when you changed to ESPN Booger, or what?
I don't even know how all that works. I just know that it's there, and, I switched. I was trying to get Booger, but evidently somebody was very smart years ago when this Twitter thing started, and they got Booger. Even though they no longer use it, they still keep it, so I can't get that. So ESPN Booger was the next best thing.
When you go ahead and look at your Twitter mentions after calling a game, especially even if it's just an LSU spring game, what are the over and under of how many positive mentions you get versus negative mentions do you get?
Usually, to be honest with you, Peter, I don't read them. I just hit the button and make them all come all the way to the top because I'm not really concerned about whether they're positive or negative, because normally when I call a game, especially like a spring game, I'm telling the game or telling the story through my eyes. And you're always going to have different people's opinions. Some people like you, some people don't. Some people, I'm a country boy from Louisiana. Some people don't like the accent or lack thereof. So I never really try to please anybody but myself. And as long as I get through with the game and I try to tell the story that I see, I'm fine with it. That's why I could care less who's in my mentions, especially you. Sometimes you pop up in my mentions, and I do see Peter Burns, and I do read your comments.
I was going to say, normally you mute me, and I think that's the case. At least you don't block me, so I do appreciate that. Boog, before we get into what you saw through your eyes calling the LSU spring game, what's the biggest thing that people don't understand when calling a game? Like when you're on radio and you're doing Get Up and you're having fun on Golick and Wingo and stuff like that, like you and an analyst for these games, there's a certain role. But what's the difference in actually calling a game up in the booth?
Well, your play-by-play guy, who's the guy who's basically telling you, hey, 1st and 10, ball on the left hash, yada, yada, yada. He's the guy that's kind of laying the canvas out. My job is to kind of not only tell you what the picture is, but why the picture unfolded a certain way. And you got to do it pretty quickly because in about 40 seconds, they're going to come back to the line of scrimmage, and you got to give it back to the play-by-play guy. So I just think it's a lot less room to tell a story, and you got to be descriptive. And my job is to explain to the audience what's happening and why and how it's happening, and even sometimes go a little bit into the future and kind of predict what could be coming next. So it's a little different because there's a time limit on it, but it's also fun because I'm just telling you what I see and kind of talking to the guy next to me.
Booger McFarland, our guest here on the Paul Finebaum Show. All right, so tell me what you did see. Put back the analyst hat. Concern, optimism? I mean, if you're an LSU Tiger and you sat through that or watching on SEC Network, what do you take from it?
Here's what I saw, and you can decide whether it's positive or negative or concern or optimism. Here's what I saw. I saw a team that's going to be very strong on the defensive line. They got 7 or 8 guys they can go and play with. I saw a team that, from the offensive standpoint, line-wise, they got 7 or 8 guys to choose from. They got to decide which positions they put in certain guys. I think Damian Lewis is an unsung hero, quote-unquote, that no one really knows about, that's going to come in and be a start on this offensive line, probably at one guard spot. Wide receiver, they're loaded. They got guys from 6'7" all the way down to little jitterbugs like Giles. I think they're going to be great at wide receiver. Not good. I think they're going to be great. I think when you look at tailback, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the starter down there. I think the freshman that's coming in is probably going to get some playing time. Brissett is going to play a little bit. Leonard Fournette may get a little spot play. I think they'll be okay. A tailback, they can't get anybody hurt. Cornerback is a position where LSU normally has been really strong. I think that's going to be maybe a position of concern. Not necessarily a concern that you got to fret about, but they only have, like, Greedy Williams is the front line. They're going to need another corner over there. They move Manninelli from wide receiver to cornerback to kind of get some depth. They'll be okay there. The front seven on defense, when you talk about Devin White, Chase on at linebacker, like, the defense will be fine. I think the defense will be top 2 or 3 in the conference at worst. Now, the million-dollar question is at quarterback, which everyone in Baton Rouge has been saying for years. Here's what I saw. I came into the game thinking that Miles Brennan was the clear-cut number 1 quarterback. I left out of the game thinking that Justin McMillan might be the best quarterback. I don't know if he's the most consistent, but he might be the best. I think Lowell Narcisse is going to play, albeit in a Wildcat-type form. Like, he's a guy, he's explosive with the ball in his hands, doesn't really have a lot of passing acumen, but you got to get him on the field. I think it's going to be a 2-quarterback system. It wouldn't surprise me if McMillan or Brennan play, but I do think Narcisse is going to play. So now, if you're a fan, you listen to all that, you say, okay, it sounds like some good, some bad. Well, guess what? That's what you're going to get out of the spring. And I think I left LSU. I'll end on this. I went in there looking at that schedule, thinking about, it's going to be a long year for LSU. When I walked out of the stadium Saturday night, as an alumni, I felt really good about where they were. And here's why. Because they got a tough schedule, but they're built where you need to be built at, on the offensive and defensive line and in the front seven. So I think LSU can kind of feel optimistic, but they can't get anybody hurt at running back or in the secondary.
Booger McFarland joining us. When you go ahead and look at it, and that was the reason why they hired Coach Orgeron, right? Was because he was a recruiter and he can lock down the state of Louisiana. Would you argue that going back in revisionist history and looking back of kind of floating in the wind the Les Miles situation back at 2015, did that hurt last year's team as far as a year and a half down the road that they just missed on some recruiting, big time position groups?
No, I don't think Les Miles hurt that, that far down the road. Maybe in the 2016 class it hurt, or 2017, however you look at it. I think last year they just missed. Pat Surtain Jr. was a guy that he told LSU he was coming until the last minute, and he flipped and went to Alabama. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's just how it goes. And I think if you would have had another young corner coming in, they feel better about their position. Running back, they just got to go back out and find another one. I will say this, and everybody in the SEC already knows this, so I'm not unveiling any secret. The 2019 class in Louisiana is the best class in Louisiana since Michael Clayton, Marcus Spears, Andrew Whitworth.
Wow.
It'll be the class that defines LSU football for the next 5 years. I'll say it again. It's the best recruiting class in Louisiana in the last 15 years. And so if LSU is going to get back where they need to be, which is 10, 11, 12 wins playing in Atlanta for the SEC title. They need to get through this year. And by get through, I think they can. It's not going to be a 12-0 year, but I definitely don't think it's going to be 6-6. And then going into the offseason next year, they have got to win the state of Louisiana because it is absolutely loaded, Peter.
If you had to own the state of Louisiana from recruiting, you probably wouldn't want to have anybody better to recruit that than Ed Ogeron. Booger McFarland, our guest right here on the Paul Finebaum Show. Jalen Hurts' dad was in the news last week. We talked about it when we hosted the show, and now you saw, a mediocre at best spring game from Jalen. What do you think, and how do you think this thing plays out in Tuscaloosa?
I am going on record after the championship game, and I'll go on record again. I think when Alabama takes the first snap this season, I think it'll be Jalen Hurts, and here's why. I think Jalen Hurts is consistent. No, he's not the greatest passer. But guess what? He's only been, 24-2 as a starter. He understands how to run the offense. And in a spring game, you're not just going to line up and run the football all day. They want to throw the football. Yeah, he didn't look great at the A-Day. Guess what? He didn't look great last year at the A-Day, and he came on and he started throughout the season. Tua Tagovailoa is going to play. He's going to play a lot, in my opinion. And I think as we go throughout the season, Nick will decide which guy gives him the best chance to win. But there's a reason Nick hadn't just come out and said, hey, we're going with Tua, because he honestly doesn't know. And I think Nick is one of the coaches across America that rewards loyalty. And he appreciates a guy that doesn't turn the football over. Jalen Hurts doesn't turn the ball over a lot, Peter. Nick appreciates that. He's a defensive coach. All right? Tua, he came into the championship game, threw a pick, and probably should have thrown another one, except Ridley made a great play in the end zone. So I think fans are going to get all up in arms about what they see on the good side. Nick looks at the total program and the total landscape of where his program is. I think Jalen Hurts is still in the competition. Tua is a little bit more flashy, but I think Jalen still is consistent. And the name of the game is scoring points. It doesn't matter if you're scoring, running, or throwing. The name of the game is scoring points. And Jalen has done that pretty successfully over the last 2 years.
Boog, what would you have done over at down in Baton Rouge if you had an opportunity and you were playing a good amount, but then there was somebody that probably was maybe a little bit more talented and could do more stuff? I know, far-fetched idea because I know how good you were at LSU. But what I'm saying is that would you have said, hey, I may transfer after a year, or would you do what Jalen could potentially do, is have an opportunity to transfer, start over, sit out, learn a new offense, and play 2 more years somewhere?
I'm a competitor, Pete, so I'm going to get out there in the field and I'm going to compete.
Yeah.
And if and when I do lose a job, I'm going to reevaluate where I am. I'm going to stick in there throughout the season because I think once you start the season, I think you owe it to yourself and the team to kind of stick it out. And at the end of the season, when the season is over, then I'll make that decision. You know what? This guy beat me out one time. He may beat me out again. Do I want to go through that, or do I want to go somewhere else where I could possibly play, not necessarily guarantee the spot, but I have a better chance of playing? I think Jalen Hurts is not going anywhere. Sometimes when parents talk with emotion, and we listen to the parents. I wouldn't listen to his dad. I'd listen to the kid because the kid is a grown man now. All right, he's been in college. This is his 3rd year coming up, so he's like 21 years old. Mm-hmm. That's an adult. I would listen to the adult and not the parent because parents get emotional, and just like I do, because you got a little 4 or 5 little throw there. Parents start saying things that may not be true because the emotion gets behind it. I'd listen to Jalen Hurts and not necessarily his dad if I were the people in Alabama.
He is Boog McFarland. You can follow him on Twitter at ESPN Boog. Boog, always great stuff, man. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Anytime. Take it easy, Peter.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Bobby. Bobby, the basketball boy, they called him. Bobby wanted to go pro someday, so he was always out in the driveway shooting hoops. But one day, his mom came out and told him, "Hey, your wife wants you to take out the trash." His mom was visiting, and Bobby was a grown man. He had kind of missed his window. Plus, no one had ever seen him actually make a basket. But on the other hand, Bobby had heard how Geico could save him money on car insurance, so he switched and saved. So it was all good.
He is Greg McElroy, and he was on the call there in Knoxville. Hey, first of all, Greg, I appreciate you taking time from your extensive practice rounds for the Greystone member guest coming up this weekend. I know that's huge in your life, but the fact that you're spending a couple minutes with me, my friend, I do appreciate that.
Well, I signed up and thinking that it was going to be Paul on the show, so I immediately regret that decision. upon hearing Peter Burns filling in for Paul Finebaum, I was immediately thrown a curveball in which I did not hit. It was like a Florida Gator right-handed curveball. I mean, that thing was 12-6, untouchable. I just don't know how to respond.
Well, you're on the ropes. It was a Brady Singer-like a fastball and curveball. I will say this. What did we see? What exactly did we see in Knoxville? Are we seeing a team that you're like, it could be pretty good, or a team that's still a work in progress, Greg?
Work in progress.
Okay.
In the fullest extent. Because if you look at this team, the guys that were competing on the field, I'm not 100% sure that the 22 guys that jogged out there with the starting group, I wouldn't be shocked if upwards of half become replaced by some of the early enrollees. As we know, in this recruiting class, they went out and made it a high priority to get JUCO players. We also know that they are going to be hot in pursuit of grad transfer players. They, of course, have Keller Christ coming in at quarterback from Stanford and Madre London coming in from Michigan State. So that's 6 guys already that could be in the starting 22, not to mention several other freshmen that were handpicked by this staff to be part of the new regime. So it wouldn't shock me if what we saw on Saturday was completely different than what we saw in the fall. There were also 12 guys that were sitting out due to injury. So who knows, man? I mean, what we saw Saturday is probably in all likelihood going to be a completely different looking unit when they tee it up in Charlotte against West Virginia.
Greg, one of the things I have a new appreciation for is I've had been a part of a couple of game broadcasts and did the Ole Miss spring game, and last year I was on the sidelines for South Carolina spring game, is when the meetings with the coaching staff, and you guys do that every single week, and you get that information. It's closed doors, you find out stuff. What was something you found out about Jeremy Pruitt that you didn't know, whether it be the way he runs his program or just a little nugget that you found out in those meetings that you left going, that's pretty cool?
Well, I've known Jeremy for a long time. I mean, when I met Jeremy, he was an assistant coach at Hoover High School. So, now we've gone back quite some time to see him accelerate through the ranks is not really all that surprising. So I can't say there was anything from the meeting that took me aback outside of one little tidbit about Jawan Jennings, who is likely to be one of the better wide receivers in the entire SEC if he returns to form. He was a guy that was cast aside by the previous regime because of his own doing, made a lot of mistakes, did not hold himself to the letter of the law, and as a result, he was released and removed from the team at the end of the season. And Jeremy Pruitt said to him and met with him in January when he got the job, and he said, look, it's not going to be easy to get back in good graces at this organization. So I'm going to set the expectations for you so incredibly high that they're almost unreachable. I'm going to have you do this, and this, and ironed out a complete plan of everything that he expected Jawan to do. He said to us, frankly, I honestly didn't think he'd even come close to being able to do all the things that we asked of him. He said not only has he done all those things, but he's surpassed the expectations that we laid out for him. So not only at this point would he become a member of the team, but likely a big-time contributor. So that was probably the one thing that I was not expecting to hear, knowing what Jawan had dealt with in the past. But it appears like he has a newfound focus and commitment to the organization and is buying in to what the new coaching staff is asking to do.
Well, and it feels like Pruitt's in there challenging his guys. I think what he did when calling out the fans was more kind of tongue-in-cheek, almost in the fact of he was trying to get a message to his team, much like Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp does sometimes in the media, that he'll say something about one thing, but he really means it towards others. And how hard is that for a coach to come in, Greg, when you see it on any level, and you're walking into a locker room in which you didn't pick those guys? Right? Like those guys were already in there. How much do you have to recruit your own team when you take over?
Well, I think there is some of that, especially when you are trying to completely change the philosophy within the organization. I mean, it's one thing if they're going from spread to spread and there's not really a huge transition and they're keeping the same defensive philosophies and you're going to be more of a player's coach as opposed to being a guy that is expecting an awful lot. Jeremy Pruitt is going to be a Nick Saban decisive. He's going to be a guy that is going to grind those guys
like they've never been grinded before. And talking to all the players, that the coaches have been killing us to a certain extent when it comes to the workouts and what they're asked of them. But that's what's expected when you are associated with a Nick Saban type of program. Jeremy Pruitt's trying to implement his own strategy. Sure, there's a few nuances that he's changing, but they're changing with the way they work out. They're changing the way they practice. They're changing the way they walk around the facility. When they make a mistake, there's more accountability. So it's a complete shift in how the program is being run. You couple that with the different philosophy changes, both offensively and defensively, it's a completely different program. So all the guys that were recruited to run spread are now running pro style, and all the guys that were recruited to run 4-2-5 are now running 3-4 on defense, and it's a completely different shift. So it's going to take some time, and I really hope that Tennessee fans just are patient with the process and knowing that it might take a couple years, but in the long run, their shortcomings in the short term are going to be better for them in laying the foundation.
Greg McElroy, our guest here on the Paul Finebaum Show. All right, let's put you to the test because you're one of the smartest people I know, and it really pains me to admit that.
Thank you. That's nice of you.
Yes.
You're a gentleman.
Yes, and a scholar. Which one of these three quarterbacks takes more snaps, meaningful snaps in 2018? Jalen Hurts at Alabama, Keaton Thompson over at Mississippi State, or Justin Fields at Georgia?
Oh, my goodness. That's a tough question. Meaningful snaps.
Meaningful snaps. Is it going to be Jalen Hurts at Alabama? Let me stall and repeat the question so you have time to make up a good answer. Okay.
I'm going to go with Justin Fields at Georgia, and it's because I think Justin Fields, albeit maybe not as the starting quarterback, I just think it's going to be very difficult to unseat Jake Fromm. But I'd be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Justin Fields, given his skill set, wasn't used in that offense as a short yardage back or as a guy that's in there for the quarterback run game if they have both quarterbacks on the field at the same time, which we've seen at multiple places over the last few years, most notably at Penn State, where the backup quarterback, Tommy Stevens, is used sometimes as like a tight end, as like a situational player. They call it the, quote, lion position.
Yeah.
I think Justin Fields could be used in a real similar way. At Alabama would be obviously the second most likely with Jalen Hurts. Granted, I just think Tua Tagovailoa is the real deal. I've believed in that kid the second he walked on campus. I think his ceiling is incredibly high. And I just worry about Jalen Hurts after the performance Saturday. I worry about where he is from a confidence standpoint. How confident is he in his own abilities? He looked tentative. He looked inaccurate. He looked timid at times, scared to make a mistake. And those are all things that we were hoping he would have made progress in. So at this point, if I had to rank the three, it'd be 1, Justin Fields, 2, Jalen Hurts, 3, Keaton Thompson, because I don't see him playing unless something very unforeseen happens. And I hate to say it, but it would probably require an injury to Nick Fitzgerald.
Yeah. Greg, how much do quarterbacks hate two quarterback systems?
I mean, I can't speak to what it would be like. I've just never been in one. I would imagine, and I can speak from my own personal perspective, I couldn't stand it. That's just, I wouldn't be able to have the type of leadership over the team that I would require. I wouldn't be able to get into the rhythm of the game because as soon as you go to the sideline, you lose that rhythm, you lose the feel. I know you get a different sense of perspective standing on the sideline and then going back in, but I'm all about rhythm and chemistry, and both of those things would be completely disrupted if, in fact, you were in a rotational quarterback situation. So I'm completely against it. If you're playing against a lesser opponent, like a lot of these teams are, and if they want to take the quarterback battle into the season, then that's a little bit different. But if you are expected to play against, say, West Virginia in week 1, and you're trying to play with two quarterbacks, that's a very scary proposition, knowing that the other team has their quarterback clearly established, and they're going to have that rhythm from the start of the first quarter.
Final question for Greg McElroy here on the Paul Finebaum Show. If you had to say that there's one dark horse team, one team that you're amped about for college football in 2018, keep it in the SEC footprint. What team do you think is going to go ahead and surprise you?
I was about to just go off the rails and just throw you the biggest curveball ever.
Give me a curveball. No. Where you go? First of all, give me the curveball and then move back to the SEC.
Okay, for the curveball, I'm going to go with West Virginia. I think Will Grier and the type of offensive firepower that he has around him, couple that with a league that is all about quarterback play and scoring points. If, in fact, Oklahoma falters and Texas is still a year away, then who's going to come to the forefront in the Big 12? So I would look to West Virginia. I like the way their schedule sets up. Granted, they've disappointed from time to time. When you have high hopes for the Mountaineers, they seem to let you down. So I'm gonna say that they're the sneaky team that people aren't paying a lot of attention to that could be a bit of a force and maybe a 10-win team come the end of the season. So I'd say them. Granted, that's also making sure that Will Grier stays healthy, because what they have behind him is scary a little bit. So that's pending complete health and playing at a high level. All right, so that's just nationally. If I'm going to look in the SEC, I'm going to go with Texas A&M. Now, that would probably surprise some folks given the way their schedule sets up. They play Clemson, they play Alabama. They could leave September and at best maybe be 2-2. But if you look at their starting 22 and the way they have really taken to Jimbo Fisher, I'm a big believer in Nick Starkel. I think he has a chance to be an exceptional player within that offense. They have good talent on the perimeter. They have solid talent, a good nucleus of offensive linemen coming back. Their defense, and when you work defense, you start from the inside out. Their defensive tackles have a chance to be elite if, in fact, they take to the coaching and play well within Mike Elko's system. They have one of the best middle linebackers in the entire game, outside of White at Georgia, outside of Devin White at LSU. I think Tyrell Dodson is as productive as anybody else coming back in the league at middle linebacker. So I am a huge believer in the Aggies this year. It's a massive wild card given the way their schedule sets up, but they've always had those September hot starts and those November swoons. I think it could be the opposite, where they get off to a slow start, and then come November, they're playing some of their best football.
He is Greg McElroy. Bet against him in the Calcutta down there this weekend in the member guest. Greg, we appreciate the time. Hit him straight, buddy.
Thank you, brother.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You ever know who's going to give us a call here at 855-242-PAUL? How about AC Carter, former Alabama player, wanted to chime in today. AC, how you doing, man?
How you doing, Peter? Hey, Peter, first of all, man, I want to tell you now, Paul Finebaum, I have a lot of respect for him. He do a heck of a job. But tell him it's a new sheriff in town, man.
Hey, man, I have a blast doing this, man. Anytime I get a chance to chop it up with the Finebaum callers and this rowdy crew, you never know what direction they're taking you. So I'm honored every time I get a chance to sit in for Paul, my man. Thank you.
Well, man, you seem like you're having a lot of fun and you're enjoying it, man. I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you, man. You're doing a heck of a job.
Thanks, AC. So you've been around this program. When you see the kind of the headlines that are around Alabama football right now, what do you think?
Man, I tell you, Nick Saban and his staff and that whole program, not just the coaches, and that's what I tell everyone, you know, being a part of it. It's not just Nick. It's not just those 10 assistants. It's the whole program. It's those ladies in the recruiting. It's the Bama Bells. It's the guys. It's the people and the whole staff that's making this thing go. That's the number one thing. I mean, you got a lot of moving parts, and everyone is moving in the right direction and got the same goals intact.
You know, AC, I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I don't think a lot of people truly understand about how when we talk about, hey, they have built a monster. People just think that Nick Saban showed up and all of a sudden, poof, it was a monster. No. What he went through is that he looked at every single part of that program, whether it's the recruiting, whether it's the strength and conditioning, whether it's the drills that they run, whether it's film, whether it's the training room. It doesn't matter. What he did was he streamlined it and made it efficient, and everybody pulled into the right direction. So often I see coaches that have all the talent. Look at Baton Rouge last year. Matt Canada was an off-the-charts hire on paper. On paper, he was great, but guess what? He was going one direction. Ed Ogeron was going the other direction, and that's why Matt Canada is no longer there, and that's why Steve Ensminger is at least going in the right direction with Ed Ogeron, and they're comfortable. But that's people sleep on the fact that it's not just one person, it's the entire staff. And I'll tell you this, I think that's what it felt like when I was down at Athens and Kirby Smart as well. Everybody rowing in the same direction.
And that's very important. That's the key. And that's what Nick, and that's why I have a lot of respect for him. I love Coach Saban. He's a tremendous mentor to me, like a father. My kids love him. They go run and hug him every time. But when I was there as a graduate assistant in 2007, I was there for 1 year. But in that 1 year, what I sponged and what I soaked up, what he poured into the other guys with the passion, the love that he brought, and the intensity to the details, to not just throwing the right pass, but making sure that it's paper in the printer, making sure that you're on time, making sure that you look presentable, making sure that you're doing the little things right.
Wait, AC, hold on. Did you really say that he was making sure there was paper in the printer? Because part of me, I can just envision Nick Saban going to every printer in the football ops building and go, AC, there's not enough printer in printer 4A on the second building, and just absolutely saying in a staff meeting, like, why was there no paper in the printer? Why is the toner out?
Hey, man, I tell you now, the guy's so dang good at what he's do, you never know. So you better have it in there.
You kill the Joe, you make some more. AC, last thing for you. Jalen Hurts, it's such a firestorm thing. I love this kid. I wanted him to succeed on the A-Day game. I wanted him to sit there and go blow for blow, bout for bout, punch for punch with Tua Tagovailoa when it comes into fall practice. But I was disappointed with the progressions in the future that, or at least how it projects for him going forward. What did you make of that situation?
Well, I tell you now, the guy's a tremendous. He's a winner. Let me start off by saying the guy's a winner. And so no matter when you watch film as a player, as a coach, it ain't as bad as it seems when you're watching the film. Mm-hmm. You know, so you evaluate that. But I think he's coming in. The guy brings a lot to the table. Football, game, it's about team. And it's about that locker room. You hear that all the time about guys being a locker room guy, being this guy. The guy he made some mistakes in the championship game. And guess what? Someone was there to step up and fill that void for his buddy, for his brother, for his teammate. And that's what it's all about. You know, we put a lot on these young men, and we want them to be great, and we project them to be first rounders and to be this Peyton Manning or throw a lot of great passes. But the guy was a winner. Someone had to get us there. Someone had to lead us to that direction, and I think he did a heck of a job. Whatever distraction or whatever happened to where he didn't play well, that's what his buddy's there for. That's what Tua is there for, to step in and make those plays for him and fill in for your buddy when he's not capable, when he's down, or when he's not doing well, or when he's not playing well. That's what makes football great. That's what makes football a team. That's what it's all about. When your buddies step up for you and to see him on the sidelines and to see his enthusiasm with Tua, that's what it's all about. Yeah. So, yes, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Booger said. Ain't no doubt the guy has a chance to still be our guy. He's still my guy. You know, I think Tua still has more to do to earn it. Yeah, he went in and threw some great passes, but, heck, he took a sack before that. And he made some mistakes as well, and he's a great player. I have a lot of respect for him, but that's what Nick Saban, that's where his staff, and again, the evaluation process come in to where you look at everything. You evaluate everything. What does this guy, how is he going to not make us better? How is he going to not help us win? How is he not going to help his buddy get better? That's what it's all about. I think Nick does a great job of doing that and evaluating his staff. And I think Jalen Hurts is going to be a guy that's going to come in this year. I think he's going to start the first game. I think he's going to have a tremendous year. Again, Nick Saban is a defensive guy now. Yeah. It's all about the turnovers. That's what Booger and everyone's talk. It's about those turnovers. Jalen takes care of the football. And as a receiver, as a guy on the offensive side, I may not catch a ball, but if the other team ain't got it, we got a chance.
AC, you are spot on, and again, that's why that Nick Saban loves Jalen Hurts. One turnover or one interception last year. AC, I appreciate the phone call. That's one of the things you never know. Buckle up, because what you're going to see here on the Paul Finebaum Show when you have legends that go ahead and call in.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flip.
Amnesty Hour here. First time ever being done on the Paul Finebaum Show. So much stuff. And guess what? I'll kick this off. I tweeted this last week. The Jalen Hurts transfer story is so completely overblown. He's the Bama starter, and it's on Tua to beat him out. There is zero doubt that the competition will go into the start of the season, and both will play considerable snaps this year. Said that on my SiriusXM morning show over on SiriusXM, channel 374. Get there in the mornings. I would like to go ahead and grant myself amnesty. After watching this weekend, I am providing myself amnesty. I'm pardoning myself for that tweet that I said last week. And the reason why is I fully believed when I tweeted that last week before the A-Day game that Jalen Hurts was going to take this opportunity to really supplant himself as the starter, right? I mean, we've seen it, 26-2. He's been a fantastic leader. He's meant so much to this Tide team, and I still think he does, right? However, this was an opportunity for him to show the coaches, hey, I'm developing. I'm working through my reads a little bit more. I'm completing a little bit more of the deep passes. And I sent that tweet saying that this whole storyline of Tua versus Jalen is overblown, that the transfer thing, there's nothing to it. I'm creating the amnesty rule for that, okay? So I have thrown myself underneath the bus, something I have no problem doing. I'm bearing my soul to you, okay, in front of millions. That's the amnesty that I want. Hayes Kubiak, would you please grant me amnesty for that tweet that I sent before the weekend?
Granted, of course.
Thank you.
That's how the segment's going to work. I mean, as bad as the take was, Peter, we're going to offer a full guarantee.
I don't know if it was such a bad take as far as I really thought. I was placing my bets that Jalen would have a great A-Day game, and unfortunately he didn't, and that's why I think there's going to be some concern. Let's go ahead and go. I-Man, what one thing would you like me to grant amnesty for you right here on this hour?
Well, I don't need amnesty because
okay.
I come on here and I've got nothing to repent for.
Okay.
Everything I tell you is the truth, as solid as facts. I mean, I come in, I am who I am, and I don't come in pretending to be somebody else.
Okay.
But let's talk about a few things first. Now, this Jalen Hurts. I said, well, y'all reported the SEC network. I don't know who y'all is, but it has been said on the SEC network that when Fragile Fingers messed his fingers up and had to get operated on, well, this gives Jalen Hurts, boy, he gets to practice with the number ones. He's been playing with the number ones for 2 years, hadn't he? Hadn't he been the number one quarterback with the number one offense? I mean, those were the number ones on the field with him, right?
You mean in the national championship games back-to-back that Jalen Hurts has been in? Yes, that's correct. He has played with the number ones in both of those national championship games.
He was playing with the first team every game.
That's correct.
So, him getting the little shot over Fragile Fingers don't mean that it really helped him any. But it's his time to shine. It's his time to shine. And old Fragile Fingers got a brother. He's probably got fragile knees, too. So you ain't got no quarterback because that's the saying, if you got two, you ain't got one. You ain't got one. Did you hear what I say? Peter Burns? You ain't really got one. Now, I tell you what, I think there's some people on here who do need some amnesty. Mm-hmm. And let's start with the two biggest liars on this program, and that being Legend and Jim from Tuscaloosa. But not granted. You can't come in here and quit and then have these big grand send-offs like you're going on vacation and waving from the yacht club on the steamship. You can't come in here and do that. You don't deserve it. All them cryogenic little swimmers out there in California, guess what? They all thawed out. So Ted Williams had. So now Jim might actually be better than Ted Williams, but I doubt it. And I tell you what, I will grant amnesty to John.
Okay.
He was supposed to do a radio show the other day, and from what I understand, it didn't quite make it. He must have got tied up in some other thing. So John has been granted amnesty across the board because John is a working man. Okay. And he's with the SEC network. I mean, that's a really big show, really big job. And you can't get tied up with guys sitting over at the racetrack talking about margarita specials. But Peter Burns, what else do you think I should? Do you think I need amnesty from something? My team kicked the living hell out of the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
I can't think of anything, man. I honestly can't think of anything. I think that you're God's perfection to the Paul Finebaum Show.
No, I didn't say nothing about God. I didn't say nothing about God. We're not going that far. Next thing you know, y'all be quoting me like John Lennon, and I'm more popular than Jesus. I didn't say that either.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I am more popular than Jim. Guess the Wayne, Peter Burns. We are the Auburn Tigers, Ward Damn Eagle, and guess what? We only getting faster. Have a good day.
Amnesty, not needed.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
We've been having some fun with you guys. It is Amnesty Hour, okay? Phone lines are packed, but get us on Twitter at Peter Burns ESPN. What do you want amnesty for? I created this deal, and I said I'm providing amnesty from myself, who said earlier last week I did not think that there would be a transfer, quote, drama or controversy around Jalen Hurts. That's because I thought he was going to have a big weekend. He did not have a big weekend down in Tuscaloosa. I still think he's a great teammate. But Barrett Sallee had this tweet. He might not want amnesty for this one. It's NFL draft week, and we are inching closer to a dumb NFL team choosing Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson. Barrett Sallee, would you like amnesty on that tweet that you sent out earlier, or you feel strong about that?
I'm feeling very strong about that. Josh Allen is a middle-of-the-road Mountain West quarterback who did nothing special in a conference that you should do special things in if you're a really good quarterback, regardless of, what your wide receivers are like. And I do find it funny, Peter, that Josh Allen, one of the knocks that people have against him that his defenders sort of point out is that, well, his receivers weren't very good. And yet we seem to forget that Lamar Jackson, who won a Heisman Trophy, had an offensive line that you and I could have probably started for.
Right.
So, it's funny how that part of it just sort of gets forgotten about, and yet Josh Allen has these built-in excuses.
I will say this, Barrett. I think Lamar Jackson will be fun. I pull for the young man. I think he's not going to be a successful NFL quarterback. I just, I find I don't want amnesty on that take because I believe in that. Is there an SEC football take that you, Barrett Sallee, you want amnesty for here on this show, right here, right now? I will hear your grievance, and I may grant you amnesty.
Yeah, I mean, I last year I was pretty good with the things that I said. 2 years ago,
yes,
I said Tennessee was going to win the SEC East. That didn't happen. That didn't even come close to happening. I bought into the Butch Jones hype, and I apologize for that. That was incredibly dumb, and I should be criticized from now until the end of eternity for that. One that was even worse that year, outside of the SEC realm, I thought Notre Dame would go 12-0 in 2016 and make the college football playoff, and they went 4-8. So that was I'm sorry that people actually had to pay attention to that, because that was probably the stupidest thing ever said or written on the internet.
Yeah, and I think that was pretty dumb, but it happens. Barrett,
but you said Alabama was going to go 8-5 one year.
Yeah, again, I mean, listen, we are birds of a feather flock together, my friend. That's why we're talking on the radio in front of a national audience. Hey, Barrett, amnesty granted. Okay,
thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey, when you look at these spring games, what's the one takeaway that surprised you? Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Mississippi State. Over this weekend, what did you circle and go, holy heck, did that really just happen?
Well, it's Jalen Hurts. I mean, it's the obvious answer because, look, people can have their opinion of Jalen Hurts as a passer and whatnot, but I didn't think he'd actually regress, despite having first-team snaps for the entire spring. And it looked like he regressed. I thought that there would be something that you can say, oh, okay, he worked on that and he got better. He improved that part of his game.
Yeah.
He looked like a guy who has zero confidence, a guy who is completely in his own head and just hadn't taken advantage of an opportunity that was basically handed to him on a silver platter. We all thought they were going to split first-team snaps all spring. Turns out he got all of them and got worse.
I think it's for the fact of this is your opportunity, right? Like this is your chance to reclaim that throne, and there's a lot of pressure. And listen, it didn't help going into the spring game that Matt Hayes does the article, and Jalen's father, Averian, had the quote, which, again, here's one thing I want to make sure that people understand. And Barrett, tell me if you're with me on this situation. I don't think Jalen Hurts' father meant to come out and say all of this. I think he just got caught up as a dad wanting the best for his son. No different than you might do for your kids. No different than I would do for my daughter. It just the way that the quote came out about saying, he'll be the biggest free agent transfer and all this news, and that he'll transfer if he doesn't get an opportunity. I think it was necessarily heat of the moment, but unfortunately it may have put even more pressure on Jalen trying to win that job.
Yeah, it might have, but I don't think the thing when it comes to something like that, I just assume that conversation has been had between Jalen and his father privately, and I would imagine that Jalen was told, "Hey, I told this to Matt, and are you okay with it?" And I would imagine Jalen is okay with it because honestly, the quote that it wasn't that stunning. Really, I mean, of course Jalen's going to transfer. He doesn't win the job. Why would he stay?
Right.
So I thought that the shock value aspect of it was the free agent quote, which I don't think he's the biggest free agent in college football history, although he's pretty high up there. But Russell Wilson, I would argue, was a little bit of a bigger deal. But the thing that really bothered me about that is the decision for his dad to say he's not going to switch positions. Because that really sort of limits what Jalen can do. And that seemed like a helicopter dad move. And one from a guy who is a high school coach who also is a quarterback coach. So that part, I think, really bothered me because Jalen might come to a time in his career, whether it's now, next week, next month, next year, whenever, where he realizes, hey, you know what? I'm just not going to become a better passer. But I'm athletic enough to do something else. And I'm going to go try to do that because it worked for Braxton Miller. It worked for Antoine Randall. It worked for a lot of guys who were ultra-athletic, and Jalen is that. And so, it's going to be harder for him to make that decision, if it ever comes to that, because his dad went out and said this. And right now he might feel that way. But I would never limit myself like that. And whether Jalen's done that privately and his dad said it publicly or his dad just spouted it out and they hadn't actually really talked about it, it just seemed like that was a little irresponsible.
Barrett Sallee joining us here on the Paul Finebaum Show. Last thing for you, Barrett. Overall, was there a team that impressed you more than you thought you would see in the spring games? Listen, I know spring games are not the end-all, be-all, but there's a team that you looked at and says, I feel a little bit better than I thought.
Yeah, Mississippi State, I feel way better about offensively. I thought they were going to be good offensively. I think they can be great offensively. I think they had a couple of playmakers outside that showed out a little bit in the spring game. But, you had basically Keaton Thompson running with both teams. He's good. Nick Fitzgerald's good. Arius Williams good. And Kylan Hill, I think, is the best running back on that roster, and he scored 2 touchdowns. So I think the transition to Joe Moorhead from Dan Mullen is going to be about as seamless as you can possibly get. And that offense is good enough to put the fear of God in anybody that it plays. Now, defensively, how consistent will they be? I don't know. They do have some good players on that side of the ball, but, and they may be able to just be okay and still be competitive because that offense, that looks scary.
I tell you what, if you're scared by their offense, you're going to be petrified of Mississippi State's defense with Jeffrey Simmons, Montez Sweat, Chauncey Rivers. I believe that this defense will actually be what we know Mississippi State football for. That's why I think this team can win 10 games. I may want amnesty for this come in November, but this could be a 10-win team down in Starkville.
Well, I think if they're going to do that, they're going to have to win an awfully lot of toss-ups and basically run the table in their toss-ups because they'll lose to Alabama, I think. Auburn, I think, is still better than them, but, they do get them in Starkville. And then you still get the rest of the SEC West. You got to go to Kansas State. You basically have to run the table with your toss-ups. And I think that's a bit aggressive. Would it overly floor me? No. But it's not like Mississippi State can just, roll their helmets out of the locker room and strike fear into their opponents. They have to go out and earn that, and they have to do it consistently against a schedule that I think is pretty tough. And so, 10 wins I think you might want amnesty on that. But would it be surprising if they were in every game that they play? That would not be surprising at all.
I can't wait to watch it. You can follow him on Twitter at Barrett Sallee. Barrett, we appreciate the time. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right, thanks for having me, Peter.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. The Paul Finebaum Show airs weekdays on the SEC Network, beginning at 3 Eastern.